Okay, so let's get into the first questions. Philip, maybe we can start with you. Given your experience in technology in the last sort of 20 years and your interaction with many shippers around the world, what do you think the main sort of decision-making criteria are, or perhaps even should be for shippers to choose various modules, if you like, or or product types?
Yeah, so there are two approaches that I regularly see. One is this typical, like, let's say, a need-based analysis, right? So you check the as-is process that is being replaced with automation or with a current system. And that is a very structured approach, usually done by product managers or process analysts that basically go step by step, analyze the existing process, and then come to a to-be process. That is then combined with a list of into a list of requirements, and then basically set into criteria. And these criteria are typically, that's very like analytical, is the importance, the ease of implementation, and the effort. However, I think what especially in the last few years, a lot of startups and innovation has shown us that there is a second approach, which we see, which is mostly performed more on the strategy level. And that is looking far into the future, is like, what is the market need in the future? How are emerging trends or ongoing macro trends impacting other organization? And these answers then, when you see this like very far out, are then translated into what does this mean for our supply chain, and what do we need to do about our supply chain in terms of automation, in terms of software that we need to implement. And so specifically here, what is the product offering that the company wants to offer in the future? And when you think of this, basically, like, especially around the startup world, be it startup shippers or some software providers, they were more successful with this approach in the past simply because they didn't have the legacy processes over it. So when you think about deciding for an application, think of not only the traditional way, the process analysis, but also the innovation-based analysis of like, what is out there? How do I translate this into the macro trends into my product offering and then into my supply chain? So that is what I've seen. But maybe Anders, you have some considerations also for how companies are evaluating different supply chain technologies.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, look, there are, of course, the first one is, of course, a discussion about make versus buy. Okay, so if you take that aside, because I think in today's world, even if you want to make yourself, you still need to be able to build it in such a way that it connects to the ones that you buy and subscribe to. Having said that, Philip, I think another consideration is also the matureness of the people working in these companies, in the sense that if you have a technology that solves a business problem, but the people that are building it and supporting it doesn't understand the business problem, that is, I would say, something which you should be always be extremely cautious about. And the other thing is also how the organization that you're planning to get involved with, how much are they willing and interested to take you on the development journey as part of their vision. And I think when you select a provider in today's environment, the technology itself is always important, but I would always say that having somebody with a proper development path and a good support structure is probably more important than the actual technology that they deploy. But at the same time, there need to be some vision where there's an AI path, there's a more advanced path in their development, so that they have at least a mindset of innovation towards more, let's say, future ways of working, if I may use that word. Because just looking at business information technologies from yesteryears, you run a big batch process that takes maybe half a day, and then you print out a report which is static. It's already a day old already when you have it out, and it's not dynamic, right? To more of an AI based, where you can basically say, tell me what are the 10 shipments that are having a problem right now, and the system will just say, here they are. Okay, so it's a very, very different, fast-moving environment we're talking about. So I think the future is still not yet here. I've seen a few technologies in the accounting environment, which are looking quite promising. But the funny thing is, when you're asked the same question at different times of day, you get different results. And of course, that's something we need to be very cautious about, is that we have understanding of how to build the algorithms of these technologies, so that the ask or the question comes up with the right kind of granularity and extraction. And but maybe over to you, Heiner. I mean, you've seen a lot. You mentioned the last 7 to 8 years of technology, and moving from these management technologies, from these traditional systems towards now maybe more integrated solutions. How do you see from your end, from your leadership point from the past, how you see this moving, Heiner?
That's a good question, Anders. I mean, there's a couple of dimensions, if you like, right? I mean, the reason why I left a big, powerful legacy organization and started essentially greenfield was to leave the legacy behind and start fresh, right? So when big companies look to sort of modernize their tech stack, that's always easier said than done, because there's so much there. There's so many customer relationships, so many supplier relationships, and to migrate this is a huge monumental undertaking, right? What as I said at the beginning, what I find enormous is sort of the power the cloud has brought in terms of developing systems now is so much easier than it was just a few short years ago, and so much less expensive and so much faster that it's mind-boggling. So I think technology in my mind is not so much of an inhibitor, but it's still the biggest challenge is still making sure that the people that are trying to use the technology and trying to get sort of the payback and sort of prove the business case have the ability to actually do it. I mean, I can give you a couple of concrete examples. So we've deployed some pretty advanced analytics with some important shippers, and as new people come in, the new people don't necessarily know how to use these advanced tools unless they grow up in that environment, and then unless they're basically show the power of it, right? So they have pretty sophisticated and powerful tools, but if the people are not experienced, or they don't have the capability to use them, it's all for naught. And another example is one of the big sort of European shippers. We're working with them on again some specialized analytics projects as well, and they have a very, very focused way of proving the business case and making sure that the result is there. It's a very, very organized approach, and even though the tool may not be the most sophisticated one, they're able to prove the business case and grow and grow from that. So building from one success to the next. I'm last in dealing with a lot of in this case mostly freight forwarders as your customers. What are some of the lessons that you learned in terms of trying to get companies to adopt more new technological solutions?
Yeah, it's interesting because usually there is an inflection point from different companies, right? Where they say, hey, we need to do it, and often it's the market. And one mistake I've seen is that a lot of companies are just because of the pressure, the market pressure, just going to a Me Too product, looking what our competitors have or what's widely used in the market. And I think that's something that in the end will not really differentiate actually your offering, right? Because you're just following the market. And so I always said, look, there are different levels of differentiating, different decision making. The first one is like my last answer is like, look at the macro trends, right? So you have like geopolitical trends, right? And it doesn't have anything to do immediately with the software, but I'm coming to this, what it has to do with a software or application or a selection. And so the second thing is, so geopolitical trends, we have this basically currently in the Middle East and Ukraine, like, but also local trends, right? Like, especially if you're exposed to like unions and so on. And then you have a race for sustainability, which definitely like will impact far more how you calculate different emissions, how you show visibility around this. And then also what's your market showing? And that's basically an impact when you go to a Me Too product. Is your market contracting, especially with the vendors that you have? Okay, so once you understand basically what's your outer space, so to say, right? Then you can go deeper, and then you say, okay, so what do I actually seeking for? And most people saying, I'm looking for a more efficient solution. But efficiency usually is not the differentiating factor. It is either something that has something to do with expertise. So, for example, if you go on the custom side, utilizing AI for more customs, it has something to do with coordination, where saying like, I want to be more effective in coordinating, or something with customer stickiness. I want to have a better customer interaction. So don't search just for the efficiency gain, search for the other decision-making factors. And I think once you combine this, say what are my trends, and what are the what are basically the decision making factors, it becomes very clear to you that the most obvious answer, this Me Too product, is not the right product that you're searching for. It is a different product, and it becomes a technology stack where you say like, what actually do I want to? So that's a little bit what I've seen in the past. But maybe Heiner, especially like with the recent trends, maybe you've seen like how this has changed over the last few months.
So from my perspective, pure visibility in regard to tracking and tracing is not quite, or it doesn't seem to be quite as urgent anymore, because supply chains are not quite as backed up. But from my perspective, I think for when companies and people within companies are going out and trying to sort of improve the overall situation. I mean, this is why people are looking to deploy tools. I think it's one of the more important things in my mind is for them to ask the questions where they're seeking answers for. If you look at from a shipper, the basic question is, do I understand where my inventory is? Do I understand what the status of my purchase orders is? Where is it in the manufacturing cycle? Do I understand what needs to get shipped when? And then do I understand what my costs are in a real way? And do I understand how my partners are performing? So if you, whatever the questions may be, if you write these questions down and then see how do I get answers answers to those questions, without getting too bogged in too many details, maybe this could be quite a useful approach, because we've seen in terms of sort of RFI, RFQ requirements from a number of shippers, they are either very high level, they're looking to seek out what's out there, or they're so detailed that sometimes it's very difficult to see the forest in front of the trees, right? And I think I said, what are the top 5, what are the top 10 questions they're looking to get answers to? And then sort of as the next step, so figure out so with the main functionality of the systems that are available, so what is possible in terms of the organization being able to adopt the degree of sophistication of the tools, and can functionality be layered in? So instead of having like an overwhelming menu of functionality that's very, very difficult to train people on, and not to mention to get ongoing traction with. But see, there's systems that that we can sort of start modestly and then grow over time. And I think then you have a pretty high chance of getting really strong adoption and a very, very good chance to realize the business case as well. And no, Philip, you're nodding. What do you think?
No. I mean, it is what I've seen is basically this. Like implementation is very complex, right? And so, what do you go for? Mm-hmm. And then my recommendation there is what you're saying is basically like let's have basically a base layer of and I see the question here also in the Q&A, a base layer of like working supply chain management, right? That it really like works, fulfills your basic needs, right? But the differentiator is basically like almost like a layered cake, right? Are the next layers on top. So once you solve the base layer, then basically you can layer the next items on top. And as I said before, like efficiency is usually the base layer, and then you can layer it on top. And maybe we come to the other layers in the next questions. Maybe Anders, maybe you have some specific examples that demonstrate it, like how like different supply chain technologies have impacted decision making. So maybe you can bring some specific examples there.
Yeah, I think the digitization of supply chain was probably one of the most transformative in the sense of being able to communicate electronically between customers and between freight forwarders and shipping lines and whatnot, for event capture, and also correctly creating a digital representation of my job so somebody else can augment that information. And of course, on top, you have the physical, so the supply chain, which is the trade facilitation. So all the trade facilitation documentation, right? So invoices and bill of ladings, all digitized, all indexed correctly, and to be able to have access to all of these kind of information at your fingertip has probably been one of the most transformative elements of technology adaptation. And of course, you move from having a paper-based office environment. So we all remember that from the early days in freight forwarding, stacks and stacks of paper next to the screen, and this was how you operated your files. Versus today, this is all on the screen. The screen will identify and pick up what should be your daily work task, what should be the things that you need to worry about, and it should already have some form of rule-based decision-making, such a way that if these and these things happened, well, these are the suggestions that we have. So the systems are giving more and more guidance to what should be the next course of action. And I think those are probably the easier ways of adopting. And just to come back to one of the Q&A questions on practicalities and budget constraints, I think this is also probably where some of the technology providers needs to have an understanding of what's the value of that pain, what is the value of solving that solution, and I think you should not underestimate the cost of recovery if you didn't know something was late or something is missing or something is not moving correctly. I mean, give an example with inbound customs clearance in the US. If you don't do it correctly, you can have delays and you can even have fines because you need to have everything properly tallied up. So, making sure that all these things are done in a good way it's not complicated, but it's sometimes trivial to talk about, but not everyone does it in a good way, if I can say that way.
But in terms of Anders, in terms of the first question, in terms of budget constraints, most companies have budget constraints. But I think one practical way of sort of dealing with that is making sure that there's a good proof of concept and an MVP, and prove out the business case, and then go from there, go from success to success, and avoid sort of moonshots that with uncertain payback and uncertain futures as well, right?
Well,
How,
I mean,
Anders, I think one of the hugely important topics is, and that you're faced with all the time as well, is the topic of change management, right? Which is sort of a part of organizational design, and so the skill set of an organization. But what are some of the more interesting approaches that you've seen in your 30 years to deal with this topic of change?
oh, that's changes. I mean, number one, change is constant and change is inevitable. And I think an organization needs always to be open for change. I think the challenge that I went through is a lot of people that are, let's say, on operator level tend to say, I like what I do today and I don't want to change it. I'm comfortable with the processes that I have in play. And the moment the data is gone from my desk into a screen, now it becomes complicated. Where do I find information? So having that journey, at least in my early days, was a huge challenge, was a massive challenge. And I think as we progress now into the mid of the 2020s, we are to the next level. So we're moving away from an email-based operating society system. So before it was paper-based, now it's been email-based, and now it will move into a more directly into the system, and all and everything happens in the system on, let's say, in an environment where the job is there, all the communication is there, all the different connections between all the different service providers. It's a single screen, so it's a single decision point. So whatever I'm interacting with on the job is visible by everybody else. Versus in the yesterday, just 10 years ago, it was in somebody's email folder, and nobody knew what was in there. Okay, so I think those are probably the things we need to be aware of when we are looking on to the future of how to deploy these technologies. And I think the other part is also in terms of the value use case, to be able to connect all the systems into one single view. Because we are in today's environment, we have a TMS, we have a customs product, we have a finance product, we have all kinds of additional kind of satellites of information. And to be able to have that in a single pane of glass, I think that's probably where we see the easier way of adopting, because I just go to one place and I can see everything.
A little bit on change management. That's an interesting part, because I think there a lot has changed, right? So with younger generations moving in, and how they consume content, because change management often is basically content, right? So first of all, change management always comes top down, and this I think hasn't changed. But the way it comes top down has changed. The generation nowadays wants to understand the why, wants to understand why we're doing this, not only following a simple process, but basically being involved in part of the story. And this is a requirement to everyone who's implementing new application or any kind of change, is being very good at explaining why it needs to be changed, right? So that's one thing. And then the second thing is that you see this in social media today. A lot of content becomes like rather short, but often, right, rather snackable, right? And so that's basically, in terms of change, it becomes like an iterative steps more often, but smaller steps, right? And this could, for example, in training, small iterative steps that are snackable in terms of changes, process changes that are being implemented. And so I think is basically like Heiner just said, it's not like a moonshot you're looking at, right? It's not like looking, hey, we're like designing for 2-3 years the optimal application tech stack and then implement it. It's often like this iterative process where you pick people on the journey and are able to amend also, because the generation that's coming in has a much higher adaptability to technology and is able to also give feedback much faster to what's out there, right? So look for this like base layer, again, the layer cake, have this ready, and then basically do an iterative step upwards.
Yeah, that's a good approach. Anders, you want to add something?
Yeah, no, I totally want to just to add to that, because as we are moving from this monolithic development to a more object-based development, it also makes it easier to build a more process-oriented flow of how the application should be used. And as you see that we need to optimize and maybe enhance some of these modules, it's not open surgery in a legacy environment where it's really, really complicated to make the changes. We are moving more than towards a more, let's say we can just fix this little thing, or we can even say that, look, we have an external partner who can take over that role. But for the operator, it's seamless. He doesn't even see that it leaves to another service provider for this role. And I think that's probably one of the more transformative way moving forward, I think. And also probably where the AI will find its easiest way of implementation as well.
How do you, Philip, this is an interesting question for you, I think, is because when you're at Freightos, I suspect you dealt with the topic. How do you sort of manage and monitor ongoing adoption and usage? You know, one thing is change management, training, and all that stuff. But how do you monitor that what we deliver actually gets used?
Yeah. So I mean, this is key, and a key struggle, I think, for a lot of companies is ensuring the success, right? And it's basically by the customer success teams are bigger than the sales teams in most software companies, right? So often that's basically like this checking in, this feedback that you're getting. But I think one success factor was there is going level deeper. We haven't really talked a lot about like the software vendors' customers, right? Or the shippers' customers, right? And so that's what we usually like often did is hey, can you connect us with your customers? Can we speak with them about how they perceive actually your service and what we can do better? Because often we got a different answer from the direct customers than from their customers, and we were able to bring this back to the table in a totally neutral way. Because like we have no ambition working with your customer, right? There's no competition, nothing out there, but we bring you back intelligence that you can use, and that was, I think, very helpful. Understanding basically the line of communication there, and that's something that you can often do free. You know, like, hey, would you involve me with internal customer, external customer? Can you recommend someone I can speak to and get the feedback from there? And this basically constantly. Right? I don't know, Anders, Heiner, maybe tricks, pro tips you have?
Well, I mean, we're at Orchestra. We obviously monitor, and we're seeing how our customers, how often and what areas of the system they use to try to gain some insights. But it's also not optimal, and the best way is lots of check-ins with the customer success teams, right? So how are you using it? What's working for you? What's not working, and so forth.
And that's exactly what I also talked about earlier in today's discussion, is that selection of somebody who have people that you can have that operational dialogue, right? Because it comes down to, workflow management, right? How do we process a file? How do we manage a shipment? How do we manage all these expectations? And having that dialogue with the customer success team, which maybe even propose you to change some of your work processes because it's not related to technology, okay? Because the reality is, we should not underestimate, okay? If you look at the full day of an operator, the amount of hours they spend in front of an actual system is actually not that much, okay? So we need to make sure that the value of adaptability, and that's what Heiner also just talked about, is how often are they using the different functionalities? Because that's also where you can see some of the lack of adaptability of technology, because they find out it's clunky, it doesn't work like this, and we want to maybe work outside of the system. And then that's why inefficiencies come in here. But I would also like to maybe touch upon the last question that came on the Q&A. So that talks about the importance of sustainability in the supply chain. And I think one of the key areas, I think, of new ways of looking at technology is to have a more environmentally suggestion system, meaning that it proposes carriers or vessels or methodologies that allows you to get access to the least, let's say, polluting mode of transport. But equally so, it also comes down to the whole order orchestration of your supply chain, right? Because if everything you order is always last minute, then you have to fly it. But the reality is, if you plan it better, you could maybe change the expectations of your customer base. So it will allow for a 45-day transit time rather than a 15-day transit time, and by reducing at the same time a lot on the CO2. So I think there needs to be some level of understanding of the total end-to-end, and it's kind of like a ripple effect, right? So the moment you throw a stone into the water, you can see the ripples, okay? And those ripples are the different steps that happens in your supply chain. So I make a decision to make an order. Production starts, raw materials are shipped in, it's being prepared for shipment, it arrived at origin, it's shipped on the vessel, and all these things happen, okay? And I think when we start looking at a normal supply chain of today, we are talking probably about in the lowest of maybe 8 weeks from order place until we have it on shelf, but probably more realistic is about 4 months from order place until it's on the shelf. So having a good understanding of supply chain on those kind of ripples, on how does your supply chain with all the different nodes that you have, how does it all tie in, and that becomes the orchestration that Heiner talked about, right? Ensuring that all these steps can be met with the purpose of at the end of the day also a high level of sustainability.
And doing basic things like making sure that the containers you're shipping are properly utilized, and which is not always the case either.
Yeah, that's true.
It seems basic, but it's a fact, right?
Yeah, but that comes also down to the
second.
Yeah, go ahead.
No, yeah. So let's go to the second question. So how do these technologies adapt to evolving demands of global supply chain dynamics, such as increasing customer expectations, sustainability, which we just talked about, and geopolitical changes? Philip, do you want to take that?
Yeah. So it's very interesting because it's not only technologies but technology providers, right? So especially coming from my background there to geopolitical changes, right? But okay, so let's I'm using again the analogy of this layered cake, right? Once you have basically the base layer of efficiency, you're able to pick and choose a little bit the technologies that you use, right? And so you've seen this specifically during COVID, when all of a sudden visibility was a hot topic, which was there before, but it was more a hygiene item, right? And those that were still working off of Excel sheets, they were not able to effectively use the data that comes from visibility items, visibility providers, because all they got is a status quo of where their current shipment is. Once you have a base layer of, you manage your POs, your SKUs in an application that manage that you can use efficiently your supply chain, you're able to use or have different impacts from macro trends. So all of those were able to utilize the data from visibility providers and understand what the impact on their stock level is at different locations. The same with sustainability. Imagine you're getting an RFQ and all of a sudden you're required to report on the different emissions or CO2 items along your supply chain. If you're working off of a Excel sheet, to say drastically, you will not be able to calculate this. But if you have your base layer ready and you're utilizing technology that is able to calculate this, you can effectively show the impact on CO2 on your different shipments, warehouses, and so on. And so it is this modular view. You need to be very modular according to the different trends, but you have to have your base layer ready and then basically put in the different modules. So maybe or
Another
do you
point
have any?
maybe to add is if you talking about geopolitical changes, right? I mean, you now have a trend where nearshoring for a number of reasons, nearshoring is becoming a bigger topic or higher on the agenda or higher on the corporate agenda, right? But to do nearshoring or to do diversification even within Southeast Asia requires a degree of so visibility and control over your supply chain that you're able to move it from point A to point B, and that is with a proper system much easier than if you're relying, as you said, Philip, on spreadsheets and emails and so forth, right? Because you can connect digitally to your new vendors. You manage them real time. You have real time visibility in terms of what is happening in terms of the production schedule, and so forth, and then plan your shipment regardless if it's coming from China, if it's coming from Vietnam, or if it's coming from Mexico. But if it's more or less analog or with emails and spreadsheets, it's very difficult to be agile and to move around. And in regard to customer expectations, I think that's customers, whether or not they're B2C, I guess, or B2B, in the end, customers expect that things go wrong, and the differentiation of sort of good and great customer service is how people are able to recover, right? To what degree are companies able to keep their customers informed with accurate information, that acknowledging that something has not gone according to plan, and here is our approach to correct the situation and then keep following up, right? It's all about communication. It's about visibility, transparency, and really making sure that companies are able to keep their commitments, and that's very difficult to do in the world of spreadsheets and emails. Philip, any additional thoughts?
No, but like I think another question just came in is like about key features or capabilities that are that a platform should offer to address the complexities. Yeah, I mean, I think talking about these macro trends, we're talking basically again of the different layers. The main decision making factor is on obviously efficiency, but then you have three more decision making factors. One is how does an application help you to in your coordination work to be more effective coordinating different partners, right? So that's number two consideration, and it might not be the same application, but it might be an add-on, right? And think of basically all the different coordination work you do with different vendors, different truckers, different whatever you use. Then the next decision-making factor is on in capabilities or features should be around the topic of expertise, like when you in your daily process or in your usual workflow, how do you use or when do you need expertise that takes up a lot of time, and how can you use technology that enables utilizing this expertise? And they are like, especially with AI, there's a lot of like pulls in. For example, if you have lots of different like custom HS codes, right? How do you use technology to basically speed up the process of classifying them? If you have a multitude of truckers you use, how do you make sure that identifying who the right one is, who might have availability, right? So these are like where you need some expert knowledge, someone that like usually sits there like, I've done it for 10 years, I'm an expert in this, and no computer can replace me. And then the last layer, and probably the most important layer, is the customer interaction, right? How do you interact with customers with over all these layers in the future? And these features and capabilities are very important going forward. Why? Is because you have you come into a trend of like a multi-channel communication. People not only want to come to a platform, they want to utilize data through API and EDI, and they just want to speak with people on the phone and have the same data. And that's a layer of feature capabilities that's very important, the customer aspect. So efficiency is the base layer, then you have expertise, coordination, and the last one is customer interaction. Maybe Anders, you have some additional thoughts on this?
No, I think you summarized it pretty well. I think the important part is also, I mean, the question also here is buying it from, let's say, a non-ERP vendor. I think the environment today is more updated than it used to be. I think most of these large vendors, they are surrounding themselves with a lot of really cool and smart external technologies that can easily be adopted to ERP solutions. So I think it's probably more pricing from, let's say, a lesser known vendor versus somebody who's already been, let's say, introduced by the ERP vendor. I think today we are getting closer where a lot of companies can actually work with even large ERP systems for integration and also add-ons. And I think a lot of these large ERP systems are also maybe not as deep in some of the functionality, so they try to be really wide. So I think if you want to look at the pricing, it's really comes down to also what are the actual service that solution is promising you to deliver.
I think the key consideration with ERP add-ons, I think companies need to prepare themselves for long projects with a lot of consultants and a lot of money spent.
Yeah.
And then you've got pretty rigid functionality that you need to operate within, right? It's very difficult to change, and you're stuck. I mean, if you're in an environment where you have 20-year-long planning cycles and or business cycles, like if you're building nuclear power plants or things like this, the ERP add-on is a good thing because not so much will change most likely within 20 years. But if you're in an environment that is subject to a lot of change and you need to be able to be adaptable and agile, I mean that's going to be an uphill battle, an expensive uphill, long battle.
Yeah.
And because Philip, we had some experience with experience with ERP add-ons. I mean, it's usually 3 times the cost what you expect, and it takes a minimum twice as long.
Yeah, it does.
You know,
it does.
So it's, you know, for the right environment, if you're a utility type organization with long cycles, it makes sense. But otherwise, it's difficult. Philip, do you have any sort of additional thoughts and closing comments?
No, I mean, look, we've talked a lot about like the decision-making factors, and basically like considerations. We've talked about change management. It all sounds very complex. I think having like a very open approach, talking with different vendors, and speaking with their not only with their sales but directly with their like customer solution or product management team, I think will get you to the right answer. It's often that you know, a long-term relationship with vendors, with application vendors, is wanted from both sides, and to tee this off well would be having like an open like problem statement, right? Instead of basically going out with just a catalog of criteria. I think sets off a tone and sets off a collaboration that then will be long term, right? Sharing your challenges with those vendors, because then they can help you best. I think this were my like parting comments here. I don't know, Heiner and Anders, if you have some more there.
No, I totally would agree. I think as I mentioned also earlier, the actual technology is not the most important thing. It's really the people that are supporting it and who's behind it. I think that's the key. But to Heiner's point, some of these things can take 5 to 10 years to deploy because you just don't have the right understanding on both sides. Yeah.
In my mind, so my closing thought is to clearly understand the business problems where customers or shippers are looking to gain answers for, and to have an objective view in terms of what the human capital situation is like how skilled are the people really, and to what degree can they adopt new technologies and are able to really drive the business case. But in the end, it's all about realizing the business case and serving customers more effectively and being more agile and being more efficient, you know. So, okay, here's one last question. How does the rollout timeline look for an orchestration platform? I mean, usually, as I said this before, usually this is pretty quick. The connectivity is pretty quick if the goals are reasonable, and the objective is to sort of roll out in functionality in waves, and it can start very, very quickly and start getting initial results and moving on from there. So that being said, Philip and Anders, thank you so much for joining me. I think it was an excellent session.